Daniel 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream.
So now we're going back in time. Daniel chapter 6 was during the time frame of the Medo-Persian kingdom. But now in Daniel chapter 7, we're going back in time just a little bit to when during the Babylonian kingdom after Nebuchadnezzar, but in the first year of Belshazzar.
And visions passed through his mind as he was lying in bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me were the four winds of heaven, churning up the great sea."
Now, I think four winds of heaven is not really specific, that there are not only four winds of heaven. I think it just means winds from all directions in general. And the great sea, I'm not exactly sure which one that would be referring to, if it's referring to a specific sea at all.
Four great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea.
Now keep in mind that this was during the Babylonian Empire in the first year of Belshazzar. So anything that happened in Daniel during Nebuchadnezzar's reign is something that is the context of what we're talking about. And remember, Nebuchadnezzar had that dream about the statue that had a head of gold, chest of silver, thighs of bronze, and legs of iron and clay. And I understand that to mean that the head was the Babylonian Empire, the chest was the Medo-Persian Empire, then you had the Greek Empire, then the Roman Empire. History bears this out, as well as multiple biblical teachings as well. So this is the context that we're talking about. And Daniel was given the ability to interpret Nebuchadnezzar's dream about the statue, and now we're talking about the ways in which God interacted with Daniel. God gave Daniel visions also to help him understand the dreams that Nebuchadnezzar was having. And this dream that he has, this vision that Daniel has here, is very similar to not only Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, but also the vision that John had in the book of Revelation. Extremely similar, almost identical. So whatever Daniel was talking about here is the same thing that John is talking about in the book of Revelation.
First was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it.
So this one would be the Babylonian Empire. The beast that looked like a lion, that had wings, that the wings were ripped off, and it stood like a human and had the mind of a human. That would be the Babylonian Empire.
And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh."
Okay, so this would be the Medo-Persian Empire, and the fact that it's raised up on one side would maybe indicate that either the Medes or Persians were stronger and more dominant than the other, because half of its body is higher than the other half. And its primary purpose or function was to devour flesh.
After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule.
That would be the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great, and the 4 heads would be 4 prominent kings of the Greek Empire.
After that, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful.
That's the Roman Empire.
It had large iron teeth, It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left.
It's also the beast of the book of Revelation. It's described in exactly the same way, with 10 horns and one little horn that has a mouth that runs his mouth and deposes 3 other horns or kings. It's the exact same reference that we have in the book of Revelation. For the beast. The beast is all of these are beasts. These are 4 beasts. But the most terrifying beast of all is the Roman Empire. And it has many heads, many horns, or many leaders.
It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being, and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat.
So this Ancient of Days, I guess, is God sitting on his judgment seat.
His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool.
Now, this is imagery also repeated in the book of Revelation, and it's really more in reference to Jesus, I think, with the hair white as snow and hair like wool. In the Ancient of Days, Jesus was from everlasting to everlasting. So it's Jesus taking his throne.
His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking.
That's one of the Caesars that has the big mouth running his mouth.
I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time.
So the Babylonian, Medo-Persian, and Greek empires had been stripped of their authority. They were no longer the world leaders or the kingdoms of the world, but their influence continued.
In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven.
All right, so in Daniel's vision, he sees one like the Son of Man, most certainly Jesus, coming in the clouds of heaven. This is imagery that's repeated in the New Testament, talking about Jesus coming in the clouds. So whenever you see Jesus coming in the clouds in the New Testament, this is probably the source of that imagery. It's from Daniel chapter 7.
He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory.
All right, so this is Jesus. The Ancient of Days seems to be a reference to God. And the one coming in the clouds maybe is Jesus.
Glory and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed.
All right, so Jesus' kingdom is an everlasting dominion that will never pass away and never be destroyed. So we're talking about all these kingdoms that come and go. The Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek, and Roman kingdoms, they rise to power, but then they lose their power and they are swept away. But he says the kingdom of Jesus, when it rises to power, it will never be done away with. And this is also the exact same imagery from Daniel chapter 2 in Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue with the head of gold. You remember the rock that was cut out of the mountain not by man's hands, rolled down the hill, destroyed the statue, and grew into a mountain that would never be destroyed. That's the church. The kingdom of Christ is the church. And it will never lose power. It will never fade away. It will exist forever. That kingdom will exist forever. So there's really not, I guess, the dispensational idea or the premillennial idea, is that the church is temporary until God comes and establishes his other kingdom, or this earthly kingdom, where he sits on a literal throne in Jerusalem and reigns for 1,000 years or something like that. But the church that rolls into existence during the Roman Empire, once it is established, it will never be destroyed. It doesn't go away. It's not a temporary situation. It is an eternal, everlasting dominion. It doesn't go away. It doesn't change.
I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those standing there and asked him the meaning of all this.
And I assume that's one of the angels. He says, I approached one of those standing there. Who's going to interpret this dream to him other than an angel? No human would do it.
So he told me and gave me the interpretation of these things. The 4 great beasts are 4 kings that will rise from the earth. But the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever.
So in the interpretation, we have confirmation that these beasts are kingdoms. They're kings, they're leaders. It's the exact same thing that we have in Daniel 2 with the statue of head of gold. It's those 4 kingdoms. And the one that has 4 heads has 4 prominent kings, and the one that has 10 horns has 10 prominent kings, with a little one that supplants 3 horns and has a big mouth. And it says the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom, will receive the kingdom of Jesus, the Christian kingdom, the church, the kingdom of the church, and they will possess it forever and ever and ever. Yes, forever and ever and ever. Everlasting, never to be destroyed, never to be altered or overtaken in any way. It is the everlasting kingdom. The church is everlasting kingdom.
Then I wanted to know the meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws. The beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head, and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell, the horn that looked more imposing than the others, and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom.
All right, so during this kingdom of the 4th beast, this most terrifying beast with iron teeth and bronze claws and trampling everything underfoot and destroying everything, with loudmouth leaders and multiple horns or multiple leaders, multiple Caesars. It is during the time of this beast, the Roman Empire, that the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High. So that's really not the Jews, that's the Christians. It is God pronounced judgment to justify the Christians. And it came during the Roman Empire, and then the Christians possessed the kingdom at that time during the Roman Empire, and it would last forever. So this dream that Daniel has in chapter 7 is about the kingdom of Christ being established during the Roman Empire, and that kingdom of Christ, the church, would be established forever and ever and ever.
He gave me this explanation. The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time.
All right, so this is that reference to time, times, and half a time. It seems like 3.5 years. If you assume a time means a year, times means 2 years, and a half time means a half a year. Now, it doesn't have to mean that. It can mean something different, but I think most people think it means 3.5 years because there are multiple references in the book of Revelation to time, times, and half time. It's also mentions 1,290 days or something like that, which works out to be 3.5 years. So there are multiple references that would indicate that this is 3.5 years. Let's see what this note says. Or for a year, 2 years, and a half year. That's not necessarily true, but I think it's what it means. And so the only timestamp is that he will speak against the Most High God and oppress his holy people, Christians, and try to change set times and laws. That's just changing the calendar and the feast days and how you worship and trying to eliminate the Jewish system of worship, which in 70 A.D., Jerusalem was destroyed, the temple was destroyed, all the records of the Jews were destroyed, and since then, Jews have been unable to prove that they're a Jew by lineage, and they've been unable to engage in the feasts and festivals and sacrifices that they were supposed to do. And it says, the holy people will be delivered for 3.5 years. So 3.5 years, they would be delivered into the hands of a Roman king, a Roman Caesar. I guess it's this little guy that has a big mouth, the little horn with a big mouth. Christians are delivered into this Caesar with a big mouth for 3.5 years before they are delivered. And that Roman Jewish war that around, I think the war was for about 3.5 years before 70 AD. So at about 66 AD was the beginning of the Roman Jewish war. And for 3.5 years, they were delivered into the hand of big mouth Roman Caesar. This was, and then they're delivered. When God destroys Jerusalem and the temple and all the Jewish feasts and festivals and customs and sacrifices, and he confirms the establishment of the church, the Christian church, as the everlasting dominion. It began during the Roman Empire after 3.5 years of war and deliverance or oppression.
But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. This is...
So, I don't know for sure about this, but, all the kingdoms of the world are subject to God now, as they always have been, really. And this Christian church is all over the world. It's smaller in some places, but the Christian church is all over the world. And rulers from all nations at least have the ability to understand who Jesus is, but whether or not they worship and obey him, that's certainly a debatable issue. So I'm not sure exactly what this verse 27 is talking about.
This is the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself.
So, of course, Daniel's not going to understand it because it's still yet in his future. But we can look back on it and see how it makes sense that these four beasts were the four world kingdoms, that the eternal kingdom of God would be established during the Roman Empire, and that it would be an everlasting kingdom that would never lose its dominion. Jesus is king. Jesus is our king, and he has been our king since he was resurrected from his crucifixion. He became king. He went up and he sat at the right hand of God on a throne. He is the king on the throne now, and he has been king on the throne since then, and he will always be king on the throne. He is the head of the kingdom, the eternal kingdom that will never lose dominion. We in the church are his body. We are in the kingdom, and we are in the everlasting kingdom of dominion. It is a spiritual kingdom. It's not a earthly kingdom that dominates and oppresses its subjects, but we are subject to the King Jesus, who will have dominion forever and ever and ever. Under the current system, which is Jesus being king and the church being his body.